Once you hit play, you can walk away. Now this also knows if I put the dry container on, it goes, that's not the wet jar, that's the dry jar. So it gives you a different set of recipes. So for this one, the big advantage with the dry jar is that there's no minimum requirement. So if you want to use it for things like spice grinding, remember we talked about like the peanut butter, you don't have to do 3 cups of, peppercorns. If I put even just like a sprinkle of flax seeds in here, the dry container actually creates a vacuum with the blades, and once you get up to a high enough speed, it actually pulls it up off the bottom of the jar, and so you can grind these down. Now, as we saw with the smoothie, you don't have to grind your flax first. You can just put it in with a drink. This is if you want to sprinkle flax on your cereal or put it into your baking. You just want to do a little bit. So this is great for things like peppercorns, sea salt rocks, turmeric, anything dry. Now the real value of the dry container is making your own flour. Again, I mentioned with the gluten-free flour specifically. This is just rice. You can do wheat flour, you can do bean flour, buckwheat, nuts, grains, seeds, anything dry, okay? And then what we're gonna do here, we'll pop that lid on there. We're gonna pull out our handy dandy app. Again, don't need the app. I could just put it on a 1-minute timer, or I could just hit, over here, grains and fine grinds. 60 seconds. So you'll notice, you saw me do it last time, but I'm gonna read it here. Move blender dial to the 1 position, then push the start button. Can you do that? Turn the dial down to 1. Yep, and then push the button on the right. There you go. That's it. Well, so it moves left to right like this, but that's fine. It's not going to come up.
Look like that.
Because there's nothing here. In fact, with the dry container, this is how it moves the food differently. Don't do this at home, okay? You get me on camera, you get me in trouble here. But the way the dry container moves differently from the wet jar, this is pushing the food up, and then gravity is letting it fall back down into the blade. With the wet jar, what that one's doing is it's whipping it, pulling it down. That's why you see it throw around like that. What happens if you do dry grinding in the wet jar? One of 2 things. I know everyone asks because they want to save the $130. One of 2 things will happen. Anything with oil in it, like nuts or seeds, if you put almonds in here, it will grind it into almond butter. You can't make almond flour with a wet jar. It'll just turn into butter, or it won't be fine enough. This one would make almond flour, okay? Anything without oil, say our rice, for example, the wet container will actually get to a very similar consistency. You can do it, but it's basically like rubbing sandpaper against the plastic. You'll never see through your container again. It doesn't damage it, but it doesn't look nice. And for something that has to sit on your counter for the next decade, we don't replace the aesthetic damage because it works fine. Now, if I'm careful with this, do me a favor, if you could step back just a second here, look in the top of that jar. When you're done your dry grinding, it creates the well that you then add your wet ingredients to knead dough. So even though we call it the dry jar, you can actually add water, yeast, honey, and knead the dough for bread or pizza, roti, dosa, put it into the oven, you're good to go. Now this, go ahead, do me a favor. So you can touch it, you can smell it, don't eat it, okay? Everyone's hands go in here. But if you want to feel the texture of that, go ahead and touch. That's just rice and flax seeds on high speed for 1 minute.
Wow.
Right? And that's basically store-bought rice flax flour. So, benefits of the dry container. If you bake, if you're buying almond flour, rice flour, quinoa flour, this is way cheaper to make than it is to buy. And the nice thing here, they actually, most items here at Costco, if you look in the bottom left corner, they give you the price per weight, usually about 100 grams or kilogram. They sell both almond flour and almonds. And you can just look at the price per weight and go, oh yeah, almonds are cheaper. So you can just take a bag of almonds, put them in here and weight for weight, you're gonna save money. Never mind the freshness of grinding it yourself, because I can't tell you when the flour was ground. I can tell you when this flour was ground. If you do not bake, this is a great spice grinder. It's a great coffee grinder. The 8-ounce jar here, you can do coffee grinding with it if you're going to do coarse grinding. Okay? Don't do fine grind. And the reason for that, as we said, with the oils, what happens if you put oil in the wet blade? Butter. Now, have you ever had coffee butter? Doesn't exist. It's called burnt coffee. Okay? Here's what happens. So if I take coffee beans and put them in here, remember this has to be on tight enough, otherwise it won't work. If I put this on here, make sure it's tight enough to see the zeros. If I do this on number 8.
Right away?
Yeah. For this one, that's okay. So number 8 for about 10 seconds. I don't think the coffee grinding is, but this one you can play around with.
How long does it on?
10 seconds. Okay. So, there's our coarsely ground coffee. So if you're doing just regular coffee for drip percolator, that's fine. Smell this. So that smells like ground up coffee. All right? You smell that? Kids, you hate coffee? That's good? Perfect. All right. Now, what happens if I try and do fine grind? I want espresso coffee. I'm going to do it in my wet blade because I didn't buy the dry container. Here's what's going to happen. If I turn this on number 10 for that same 10 seconds, what's going to happen is it's going to heat up the oil in the coffee. It's going to pack it down. Remember, the blade's pulling down, so it's going to pack the coffee into a tight puck, and it's going to burn. It's not going to damage the machine, but look at this. So now you've got a puck of coffee under the blades that you've got to scrape out.
Oh my god.
Okay, so there's our puck of coffee.
How are you touching that blade?
Oh, the blades aren't sharp. So this is the secret to Vitamix. The blades aren't sharp. Don't do this at home. They're still pointy, okay? But they are not sharp. Now, smell that. That's some gross burnt coffee. Don't want to drink that. So that's the difference between the wet and the dry. Anything with oil in it, you'll burn it in the wet jar.
We're gonna get the dry.
There we are. And these are all of these accessories here, they are fully dishwasher safe. So if you prefer to clean them that way, you can. But the soap and water will generally work. I'll usually wash, like these ones, I usually just wash it by hand. It's up to you. Touching on the blade design here. Someone asked earlier the difference between the Vitamix and other blenders. One of the most basic things we expect the blender to do is to crush ice. Would you agree?
Yeah.
If I put a piece of ice on my counter and I asked you to crush it, would you use a knife or a hammer? Hammer. That's why blenders can't crush ice. You get frustrated. Whether you spend $50 or $300, blenders never seem to do it because they've got sharp blades. The trick with the Vitamix is that they're blunt by design. It's also why you never have to maintain them. You don't sharpen them. You don't do anything because they're blunt. They're only going to stay blunt. But they're designed specifically for crushing and pulverizing. That's why the only food processing job that a Vitamix can't do is slice.